Hi everybody, it's Mr. Stevens back. We are going to jump right back into Son of the Morning Star, Custer and the Little Bighorn by Evan S. Connell. We are going to jump right back in where we left off in the last video. So if you haven't listened to the previous videos, feel free to go back and do that now so you know what's going on. Here we go, Son of the Morning Star, Custer and the Little Bighorn by Evan S. Connell. With them on that first day were interpreter Fred Gerard and a mixed-blood Picouni scout named Billy Jackson. Gerard was French, although born in St. Louis. He married a Ree squaw and eventually sold advertising for Pillsbury Mills, which may sound implausible, but is nonetheless a fact. Before obtaining this excellent position with the milling company, he had worked as an Indian trader, during which time he learned Arikara and Sioux and occasionally spent a brutal Dakota winter huddled with prospective clients in ravines along the upper Missouri. He and Billy Jackson were mounted, but DeRudio and O'Neill had lost their horses, a circumstance which made this uncommon quartet extremely vulnerable. In case of discovery, the horsemen might escape, but not if they tried to carry passengers. Therefore, a plan was worked out. If the Sioux should find them on, the equestrians would gallop off, expecting to be chased, while the pedestrians would duck into the shrubbery and hope for a miracle. It was not an altogether satisfactory plan, but they had a few alternatives. They were further imperiled by the fact that Gerard was riding a stallion and Billy Jackson was riding a mare. These animals began to act very badly. Gerard said, quote, "putting us in danger of being discovered by the noise they made. We finally improved the situation by tying their heads together." All day Sunday, the fugitives kept quiet, and about 10 o'clock that night started moving upstream. They passed a number of bodies. In the hazy moonlight, they recognized McIntosh, which sounds a little surprising because Gibbon's men could not identify him, but of course, Gibbon did not get there until Tuesday. At one point, O'Neill asked Gerard to enter the stream on horseback to find out how deep it was. Gerard refused. O'Neill then waded in or jumped off the bank and almost disappeared. Obviously, this was not a good place to cross, but all four were thirsty, so before climbing out, O'Neill filled his hat and passed it to the others. No doubt, this was logical. If you are thirsty and find water, you drink. Nevertheless, it is preposterous. If these men were seen, they would be shot, yet O'Neill stood there dipping his hat in the stream, carefully handing it up to his friends. Farther along, the water rippled, indicating shallows, and here Gerard removed his expensive gold watch. Quote, "O powerful one, Daymaker," he muttered in Sioux while holding aloft the watch, "and you, people of the depths, this I sacrifice to you. Help us, I pray to you, to cross safely here." "What were you saying?" DeRudio asked. "What was that splash?" They entered the stream cautiously, feeling for the bottom, but it was so shallow that the horses' knees did not even get wet. Billy Jackson said he had to bite his lip to keep from laughing when he thought about Gerard's watch. Not long afterward, a party of Sioux heard them. Gerard and Jackson galloped away, as agreed, while DeRudio and O'Neill wriggled into some bushes. Darkness saved all four. They remained hidden the next day, DeRudio and O'Neill together, Gerard and Jackson separately. That night they met again on Reno's hilltop. None of them had eaten since Sunday morning, and Gerard, at least, felt ravenous. He was offered cold coffee and biscuit. His stomach objected. Then he tried to chew a piece of salt pork, but fell asleep with the pork still in his mouth and did not open his eyes for 10 hours. One of Reno's white scouts, George Herendeen, also was trapped in the valley, but managed to hide in a willow thicket not far from the black interpreter Isaiah Dorman, who had been caught. Herendeen could do nothing to help. Quote, "I saw Indians shooting at Isaiah and squaws pounding him with stone hammers. His legs below the knees were shot full of bullets." By another account, Dorman's ankles and shins were scoured with buckshot. More significant than the choice of weapon is the fact that they wanted him to suffer. They wanted all of the Bluecoats and everybody who accompanied the Bluecoats to pay for this attack, but Isaiah Dorman became a special target. Nearly every description of his death emphasizes that the Indians killed him slowly. He had a coffee pot and a cup, although why he carried a coffee pot into battle is not explained. And as he lay dying among the prairie dog mounds, they filled the cup with his blood. Rees, who found his body, mentioned a kettle full of blood, but that might be questionable translation. Near him, the Rees discovered one of their own, stripped, sliced open, a willow branch stuffed into his chest with the leafy part extruding. A Sioux chief talked about Isaiah's death without animosity, almost indifferently. Quote, "We passed a black man in a soldier's uniform and we had him. He turned on his horse and shot an Indian right through the heart. Then the Indians fired at this one man and riddled his horse with bullets. His horse fell over on his back and the black man could not get up. I saw him as I rode by." Private Slaper told Brinnenstuhl that Isaiah was, quote, "badly cut and slashed while unmentionable atrocities had been committed." Custer's orderly, John Berkman, was more direct. Dorman had dozens of arrows in his breast and, quote, "a picket pin through his balls." Stanley Vestal observed that he was well liked by the Indians. Vestal, who was not present at the Battle of Little Bighorn, talked to the various participants long after the battle and subsequently produced a story of Isaiah's death which sounds incredible. We are told that Sitting Bull came upon Isaiah grievously wounded. Quote, "The Negro asked for water, and Sitting Bull took his cup of polished black buffalo horn, got some water, and gave him to drink." Well, just as a tender scene occurs in an 1896 book for boys called 50 Famous Stories Retold, here we learn of a 17th century battle between Swedes and Danes in which the Swedes are defeated. A Danish soldier is about to drink from his flask when he hears a voice nearby. "Oh, sir, give me a drink, for I am dying." It was the voice of a wounded Swede. The Dane compassionately knelt down by the side of his fallen foe and pressed the flask to his lips. Private Roman Rutten, unlike Vestal, did fight at the Little Bighorn, and his reports of Isaiah's last stand rings true. Rutten was on horse and hated the odor of Indians, so his immediate problem was how to stay in the saddle. During a wild ride, he passed Isaiah, whose horse had been shot. The black man was on one knee, firing carefully with a non-regulation sporting rifle. He looked up and shouted, "Goodbye, Rutten!" That the black-white man, Waiskin Sapa, was well liked by Indians seemed to be a fact. They called him Teet, among other names, possibly because Isaiah sounds rather like Azenpi, their word for it. Or perhaps his black skin reminded them of a buffalo cow's smooth black nipple. There are no photographs of him and only two descriptions, both from hostels. Both said he was very black and very big. A pictograph of Reno's retreat shows a black man in army uniform flat on the ground beside a prostrate white horse. For some inexplicable reason, he has an abnormally thick right thumb. Where he came from and what drew him to the unexplored Dakotas is not known. He may have been a runaway slave or a freed man, because there is no record of him until after the Civil War. Several male slaves belonging to the Dorman family of Louisiana and or Alabama during the 1840s are said to have escaped, and one of them reputedly was named Isaiah. He first appears on November 11, 1865, when he was hired by the War Department as a courier at $100 a month, which was good pay. He traveled from Fort Wadsworth to Fort Rice and back again every month, afoot, with a sleeping bag on his shoulder and the mail wrapped in a waterproof cloth. Wadsworth and Rice were almost 100 miles apart, and each trip took 5 days. He may not have been able to afford a horse, or he may have thought a horse would deteriorate in such rough country. Whatever the reason, he walked, and the government paid him well because at any moment some discontented or ambitious Indian might lift a courier's scalp. He did this off and on for about 2 years, then vanished. He showed up intermittently during the next 4 years, working as a woodcutter for Durfee and Peck, but most of that time he spent with the Sioux. It is known that he married a Santee squaw, and probably he did become friendly with Sitting Bull. In 1871, the Army hired him to guide the Northern Pacific Railroad survey team, and for the ensuing 5 years he worked as an interpreter at Fort Rice. Custer demanded his services at the last moment in this fatal year. There's a letter. Headquarter Middle District, Department, Dakota Fort A. Lincoln, D.T., May 14, 1876. Special Order Number 2. I.V., the commanding officer, Fort Rice, D.T. will order Isaiah Dorman, post interpreter, to proceed to this post and report for duty. Regimental Quartermaster H.I. Nolan's official report concerning persons and articles hired and employed, expedition in the field on the march between Fort Abraham Lincoln and the Yellowstone River MT, notes that Isaiah Dorman was owed $62.50 for services rendered during June. 3 years later, a certain Isaac McNutt tried to collect this money. McNutt worked as a handyman around Fort Rice and had known Dorman, but he could produce nothing to substantiate his claim. There were no other claimants, and because Isaiah's next of kin, his Santee wife, could not be located, the Treasury Department retained his wages. Perhaps by now the file has been closed, but it is hard to tell what goes on behind government doors, so Isaiah's wages might be still accumulating interest. And considering that he married an Indian and felt comfortable among them, and they with him, their savage treatment of him seems odd. The explanation is simple. They thought he had betrayed them by working for bluecoats, and a traitor deserves no respect. So much for Isaiah. Together with Herendeen, DeRudio, O'Neill, and several other whites, a number of Ree scouts looked for hiding places among the cottonwoods and willow thickets. One of these, Young Hawk, decided after a while that death would be preferable to such humiliation. He took off his government coat and blouse, hugged his horse, and said, "I love you." Then he stood up and began shooting. The Sioux fired at him but missed. Young Hawk ducked back into the bushes, crawled a little distance, and again jumped up. Once again the Sioux bullets missed, and not long after that they went riding downstream to attack Custer. Young Hawk, finding himself alive, concluded that his valiant death could be postponed, maybe for quite some time, and headed for the American flag on the hilltop. Life at the top was better, if not much. 32 of Reno's command were dead, 10 or 11 were wounded. According to plan, Custer would strike the north end of the camp, or the flank, while Reno attacked from the south. Now the lower jaw of this primitive trap had been bent out of shape, and the upper jaw was nowhere in sight. All right, and we will finish there for this video. We will pick up where we left off in the next video. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Again, Son of the Morning Star, Custer and the Little Bighorn by Evan S. Connell. And we will see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.